Good morning. We're going to begin the course with a unit that reviews some of the topics that you're probably a little bit familiar with, and it will help us to refocus on some of those skills that we're going to need to use throughout the course as we work along this semester. What we're going to look at today is reviewing BEDMAS. Now you're probably very familiar with that word. What is BEDMAS? Well, it helps us remember the order of operations. And if you think back to any of your previous math courses, you'll probably recognize that each one of the letters in the word BEDMAS stands for a different operation. B stands for brackets, E is for exponents, D is for division, M is for multiplication, A is for addition, and S is for subtraction. So as we look at this word BEDMAS, it tells us that we're going to need to work with brackets first, then we're going to deal with any exponents, and we're going to work our way on down the list that we have. One little thing we need to remember is that the division and multiplication, we do these together from left to right. So even if we see a multiplication before division, on the left hand side, we're going to actually do that first, even though the word divide comes before multiply. And it's the same thing with addition and subtraction. We're going to work on these together from left to right. And we'll look at that as we work through some examples in a couple minutes. Now, why do we use BEDMAS? Well, BEDMAS is something that was agreed along a long time ago, but this is so that we come up, or we can agree on, a single correct answer. If I was to give the same question to 5 different people with lots of operations, we may end up with 5 different answers if people do the operations in different orders. So there's 2 examples that I have written down here. You'll notice that it's the same question, 2 plus 3 times 5 in both cases. But you'll also notice that we have 2 different answers here. So how do we know which one is correct? We've got the same question done 2 different ways. If you look at the order that the operations were done, in the first question here, we have 2 plus 3 equals 5. And then we carry times 5 down to get 5 times 5 equals 25. In the second example, we started with the 3 times 5 to give us 15. And then 2 plus 15 is 17. So the one which is correct is the second example. And why is that one the correct answer? Well, if we look here, in this case the multiplication was done before the addition, which if we look back to BEDMAS, multiplication comes before addition. Okay, so this one is done with the correct order of operations. In the first example here, we actually had the addition done first and then the multiplication, so that's not following the proper order of operations. So the second one is correct because it follows BEDMAS. So we're going to work through some examples together here, and then you'll get a chance to try some on your own. Okay. At any time, feel free to pause the video, go back, look at an example that didn't quite make sense the first time through, or if you just feel that you think you have a good handle on it, try the question out on your own, and then start the video again to check to see how you did. In the first question here, we have 2 plus 3 and an exponent 2. So the operations that we have in this question are addition and the exponent. And again, if I go back to that favorite word BEDMAS, we'll see that the exponent comes before the addition. So we need to deal with that exponent first. So you could do that on your calculator, or you may remember that 3 to the exponent 2 actually means 3 times 3. And if we think about 3 times 3, well, that gives us a 9. Once we take care of the exponent, the only operation left is that addition. So we can easily do 2 plus 9, giving us 11. And if we think about if we didn't do BEDMAS in the correct order. If we did the addition first, we would get 2 plus 5, or sorry, 2 plus 3 equals 5, and then 5 squared would be 25. So you can see that we would get a different answer if we didn't follow the proper order of operations. In the second example here, you'll notice that it's a little bit more involved. There's more numbers, there's more symbols, more operations that we have to deal with. But we're just going to keep going back to this BEDMAS and pick it apart one step at a time. So the first thing we want to look at is the brackets. Always start with brackets. So inside the brackets are right here. You'll notice that we have addition, and then in here, when we don't see an operation, with the 2 bracket 5, there's actually an invisible multiply sign in there. So we have an addition and a multiplication. Which one comes first? Well, BEDMAS tells us that the multiplying comes first. So I'm going to leave this addition alone for a minute, and I'm going to multiply the 2 and the 5 together to get 10. I still have some brackets here, so I still need to keep working what's inside the brackets. Now I just have 3 plus 10. 3 plus 10 is 13. And as soon as we do that single operation or that final operation inside the brackets, we can actually get rid of those brackets and just write the number down. So we end up with 2 minus 13, and when we subtract, we end up with an answer of 11. If you flip over to the back side of the page, we'll look at one more together here, and then I'll leave you to try the others on your own. But sometimes we can have questions that look a little different. Okay? So we have multiplication, we've got subtraction, and then if we remember, this line in the middle is another way that we can write division. So again, I'm just going to write the word BEDMAS at the top here to remind myself the order that I need to go in. There's no brackets, there's no exponents, so I can skip right to the dividing and multiplying. And when I look at the dividing and multiplying, I'm going to go from left to right. So if I start here, I see 5 times 2. So I know 5 times 2 is 10. I'm going to leave that subtraction alone because I'm not doing anything with it. And for the moment, I'm going to write divided by 3 minus 1. Now we're down to subtraction and division. Now BEDMAS tells us that division has to come before subtraction. But in this case, we don't know what number to divide by what number. So whenever we have something that looks like a really large fraction, we actually need to work out the top and the bottom so that we know what numbers we have to divide. So this is kind of a special case of BEDMAS where the dividing is actually going to come a little bit later. So I can do the 10 minus 6. The 10 minus 6 gives me 4. And I can work on the 3 minus 1. 3 minus 1 is 2. And when we simplify it down to single numbers, now it makes a little bit more sense. We can take 4 and divide it by 2, giving us a final answer of 2. So whenever you see a large fraction question, or it looks like a fraction with some numbers on top and some numbers on bottom, we actually need to work out the top and the bottom so that we can divide those single numbers out together. At this point, you should probably try and pause the video, try these next 3 questions on your own, and once you think you have the solution, start the video up again and see how well you did. Okay, we'll continue on looking at these last 3 questions. 1/2 of 12 divided by 2. Now this word of, we'll come back to what it means in a minute, but we can probably logically figure this one out. 1/2 of 12. Well, if I cut 12 in half, I'm going to be left with 6 divided by 2. Okay, so we can logically think of what this question means. 1/2 of 12, 6 divided by 2. And then when we finish this off, 6 divided by 2 is 3. So how does that translate into mathematical symbols? Well, this word of in math is a representation of multiply. So we can think of this as 1/2 times 12 in our calculator, because our calculators don't have an of button, but they do have that multiply button. And if I break it down just a little bit further, again, this little line in the middle here, just like in the previous question, that means divide. So I could think of this as 1 divided by 2 of or times 12 divided by 2. So I could translate this into straight multiplication and division symbols. And then going back to BEDMAS, now I know that I'm going to do my dividing and multiplying in order from left to right. So if I was to do that on my calculator, 1 divided by 2 would be 0.5, which you probably recognize is the same as 1/2, times 12 divided by 2. And then when you do 1/2 or 0.5 times 12 in your calculator, you come out to this 6. And we can carry on from there. Moving on to the next question. 36 divided by bracket 12 minus 3 plus 22. BEDMAS says we're going to do the brackets first. So 12 minus 3 is 9. I'm going to keep my division and keep my addition because I haven't dealt with those yet, so we want to carry them on through. BEDMAS tells me next I have to do my division. So 36 divided by 9 is 4. Keep that addition. And then our last step, when we combine the 4 and the 22 together, we get 26. The last question looks similar to the one on the top here, where we have what looks like a really big, ugly fraction. So remembering that this line in the middle means divide, but we have to actually work out the top and the bottom to figure out what numbers we have to divide. So if I look at the top, I've got subtraction, addition, and division. Division must come first. So I'm going to leave the rest of the question alone. And then 12 divided by 4 is 3. And I can work this division at the same time. 64 divided by 8 is 8. Now if I look at BEDMAS, BEDMAS says that addition comes before subtraction, but if we think back to the front side, the addition and subtraction we're going to do together from left to right. So even though that subtraction comes first in the line, we can work it before the addition. So if we think 16 minus 3, well, 16 minus 3 is 13, and then I add 3 back on because I can do the addition and subtraction together. 13 plus 3 is back to 16 over 8. And now that I'm down to a single number on the top and a single number on the bottom, I can do this division. 16 divided by 8 is equal to 2. So the goal for today is to remember the order of operations, using that word BEDMAS to help you out. If you feel comfortable, move on to the practice exercises. Once you have those complete, check them off on your checklist and hand them in to me so I can have a quick look over them for you. If you need to pop back to a question that we already looked at to review it a little bit more, feel free to go back to wherever you need to in the video. And we'll see you next time.